Jonathan Carter, the CEO of one of the country's largest diner chains, had built his empire from the ground up. Yet lately something didn't sit right with him. Profits were steady, reviews were decent, but he kept hearing whispers, employees quitting unexpectedly, complaints about harsh working conditions. He had seen reports, but numbers on a spreadsheet only told part of the story. Tonight, he needed the truth. Dressed like an average customer, he slid into a corner booth and picked up a menu, scanning the laminated pages as if he hadn't memorized them years ago. The place looked fine, clean tables, friendly chatter, but there was something else in the air, something heavy. His eyes flickered to the kitchen door, swinging open and shut, catching glimpses of hurried workers. Then he saw her, the waitress who would change everything. Jonathan barely had time to settle in before a young woman approached his table. Her name tag read Lisa, and though she wore a polite smile, it didn't reach her tired eyes. Dark circles rested beneath them, her shoulders slightly slumped as if carrying an invisible weight. "Welcome to Carter's Diner. What can I get for you?" she asked, her voice gentle but drained. Jonathan ordered a simple meal, coffee, eggs, and toast, just enough to keep up the act of being a regular customer. But he wasn't just watching the menu. He was watching her. There was something about the way she moved, the way her hands shook slightly when she wrote his order, the way she blinked hard as if fighting back exhaustion or tears. As Lisa walked away, Jonathan overheard a hushed conversation between two waiters near the counter. "She's barely holding it together," one murmured. "I heard she's behind on rent, and her kid's sick again." Jonathan's grip on the coffee cup tightened. He had come here to evaluate his business, but what he was uncovering was something far more personal. This wasn't just about the diner. This was about a woman on the edge. As Jonathan stirred his coffee, he suddenly heard it. A muffled sob, barely audible over the clatter of dishes and sizzling griddles. He glanced up, his eyes following the sound toward the kitchen door. It swung open for just a moment, revealing a glimpse of Lisa standing near the prep station, her back turned to the bustling room. She was trying to be quiet, pressing a napkin to her face, her shoulders trembling. A cook passed by, throwing her a quick glance before looking away, pretending not to notice. Another waitress whispered something to her, and Lisa only nodded, taking a deep breath, as if trying to compose herself. Jonathan's stomach twisted. This wasn't just exhaustion. This was real, crushing despair. A moment later, the kitchen manager stormed past Jonathan's table, grumbling under his breath. "Now's not the time for drama," he muttered as he pushed through the door. Jonathan leaned in, straining to hear. Lisa's voice, barely above a whisper, cracked with emotion. "I just don't know what to do. Rent's due. My son's fever won't go down. I can't—" The rest was lost beneath the clang of a dropped tray. But Jonathan had heard enough. This wasn't just a struggling employee. This was a mother at her breaking point. He set down his coffee and took a deep breath. He had come here undercover to observe, but now he knew he couldn't just sit back and watch. Jonathan sat frozen, his coffee untouched. He had spent years building this company, trusting reports, performance charts, and customer surveys to tell him how his business was doing. But no spreadsheet, no quarterly meeting had ever shown him this. The pain, the struggle, the quiet suffering happening right under his nose. He looked around the diner again, this time with different eyes. The worn-down staff, the hurried steps, the forced smiles. They weren't just working. They were surviving. And Lisa, she wasn't just an employee. She was a single mother fighting to keep her world from falling apart. Jonathan clenched his jaw. He had always believed in hard work, but what he was seeing now wasn't just hard work. It was exploitation disguised as business efficiency. A question gnawed at him. How many more Lisas were out there? How many more employees in other locations were quietly struggling, sacrificing their well-being just to keep a paycheck? He exhaled sharply. He needed to do something. But how? Should he step in now, reveal who he was, and try to fix this on the spot? Or should he wait, gather more information, and figure out a long-term solution? Before he could decide, the kitchen door swung open again. Lisa stepped out, her face composed but her eyes red-rimmed. She was trying, desperately, to act like nothing was wrong. Jonathan's heart sank. He didn't have the luxury of waiting. He had to act. Now Jonathan set down his napkin, his mind made up. He couldn't just walk away, not after what he had seen. He flagged Lisa down as she passed by his table, her notepad clutched in one hand, her eyes unfocused. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Would you mind sitting for a moment?" Lisa hesitated. I'm working." "I know," he nodded, "but I think you need a break." His voice was kind but firm, and something in his tone made her pause. She glanced toward the manager, who was busy berating another server, then let out a breath and slid into the seat across from him. "I overheard what you said in the kitchen," Jonathan admitted. "About your son, about your rent." Lisa's face paled, her fingers tightening around her pen. I shouldn't have." "No," he interrupted softly. "You shouldn't have to struggle like this." Lisa blinked at him, confusion flashing in her tired eyes. Jonathan reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, placing a thick envelope on the table. "This isn't charity," he said. "It's something I should have done a long time ago." Lisa stared at it, shaking her head. "I can't." "You can," Jonathan insisted, "and you will." Tears welled in Lisa's eyes, but before she could say another word, the kitchen manager noticed them and stomped over, face red with irritation. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Jonathan slowly stood, looking the man straight in the eye. It was time to reveal the truth. The kitchen manager's face twisted with irritation. "Why are you sitting down when there are tables to serve?" he snapped at Lisa. "Get back to work." Lisa flinched, her fingers brushing against the envelope but not taking it. Jonathan, however, didn't move. Instead, he slowly placed his napkin on the table, straightened his coat, and turned to face the manager fully. "I don't think you realize who you're talking to," Jonathan said, his voice calm but firm. The manager let out a short, mocking laugh. "Oh yeah? And who exactly are you?" Jonathan reached into his pocket and pulled out his business card, setting it on the table with a deliberate motion. The name on it made Lisa's breath catch in her throat. Jonathan Carter, CEO of Carter's Diner. The manager's smug expression vanished. His face drained of color as he stammered, "Wait, you're—" "Yes," Jonathan interrupted. "I own this place, and I just watched you dismiss and humiliate one of my hardest working employees." He let the words sink in before adding, "That ends today." Lisa's eyes widened as she looked from Jonathan to the stunned manager. Everything was about to change. The kitchen manager swallowed hard, his confidence evaporating. "Mr. Carter, I didn't know," he stammered. "That much is clear," Jonathan replied coolly. He glanced at Lisa, whose hands were trembling over the envelope, uncertainty still in her eyes. "And that's exactly the problem. You don't know your employees. You don't see them." The diner had gone silent. Customers and staff alike watched as Jonathan turned back to Lisa. "You've given everything to this place, and yet you've been struggling alone. That ends today." Lisa shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything yet," Jonathan said, pushing the envelope closer to her. "This is for your rent and your son's medical bills. But beyond that," he took a deep breath, "I'm making changes. Salaries, benefits, management training. No more workers being treated like numbers." Tears streamed down Lisa's face as she finally picked up the envelope, her voice cracking. "Thank you." Jonathan gave a small nod, then turned back to the manager. "As for you, we need to have a serious conversation." As Lisa clutched the envelope to her chest, she realized her life had just changed forever.